You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. Deuteronomy 6:8 ESV. Hey, welcome to a quick transmission here from Hands and Eyes. Repairing the Romans Road, part 2 in our kind of series that I'm trying to put together here. This will be really quick. Here I want to talk about Romans 4:14 through 16 and the missing legalist. Let me give you the passage here in the NIV. For if those who live by law are heirs, faith has no value and the promise is worthless, because law brings wrath, and where there is no law, there is no transgression. Therefore the promise comes by faith, so that it may be by grace and may be guaranteed to all Abraham's offspring, not only to those who are of the law, but also to those who are of the faith of Abraham. He is the father of us all. All right. Now, one thing I could quibble with here, and I'll just not do it, I'll not say too much about it, but I really think not capitalizing law in this passage is itself misleading. It's talking about the Torah, the law that was given at Sinai, the law of the what we traditionally call now in the English-speaking world the Old Testament. I don't really like that term, but that's what we call it. The Hebrew Scriptures. All right, but I'm going to let that go for now. Just let's put that back in place. Okay, so that's how the NIV from 1984 reads. And what you'll notice is you have those who live by law mentioned at the beginning of the passage, and those who are of the law mentioned towards the end. That's verse 14 and verse 16. Okay. Now, that isn't really accurate. Here's the NASB, which does a much better job. In fact, it's really perfect. For if those who are of the law are heirs, faith is made void. So that can't be true. They can't be heirs. But at the end, the grace, the promise will be guaranteed to all descendants, not only to those who are of the law. So that keeps it the same, which is what it should be. I mean, the only problem I have with the NASB here is they make it plural at the bottom, which I'm surprised. I'm pretty sure it's singular. But in any case, we'll see this in a minute. Here's the ESV. There it's adherents of the law and the adherent of the law. So it goes from, it's plural at top and singular at the bottom. But I don't like this term adherents as much as simply of the law, because there really isn't any Greek word that kind of really corresponds to that in the text. They're just kind of assuming that's the meaning of the law, and they just didn't need to make that decision for you, but still, at least it keeps it comparable. That's good. Now, here's the Greek, by the way. Eknomou and to eknomou is an article there in between, but it's still the one or the ones of the law. That's it. Ek means from, or of, if it means, it's in source, and then nomou, law, nomos. Okay, so let's go to the modern NIV, and it's a little bit even worse. It's instead of those who live by law, it's for those who depend on the law are heirs. If they're heirs, faith means nothing. But then there's those of the law who are also going to be guaranteed as part of Abraham's offspring, along with those who have the faith of Abraham. So let's take that passage right there and force it to be consistent. Here's what they're asking us to accept. For if legalists are heirs, because that's obviously what those who depend on the law means. For if legalists are heirs, faith means nothing. The promise is worthless. But then skipping down to the bottom there, so that it may be by grace and may be guaranteed to all Abraham's offspring, not only to Jews, but also to those who have the faith of Abraham. That's what's going on. They're saying it means legalists at one point, and it just means those of the law, i.e. Jews, maybe Gentile proselytes, but it means circumcised people, basically, in context. And that's how you take it. And you wouldn't know that it's the same group of people. Now, if we take the forced logic and make them keep the phrase the same in both cases, yes, one word for two entirely different things. That just doesn't work. So let's do the forced logic really. We're saying basically, for if legalists are heirs, faith means nothing and the promise is worthless, because the law brings wrath, and where there is no law, there is no transgression. Therefore the promise comes by faith, so that it may be by grace and may be guaranteed to all Abraham's offspring, not only to legalists, but also to those who have the faith of Abraham. He is the father of us all. That doesn't work. That doesn't make any sense, and no Protestant, interpreter would ever go for that. So what's going on? You see the contradiction. On the one hand, supposedly Romans 4:14 is saying that legalists can't be saved. All right, and then Romans 4:16 it says legalists are saved along with believers. Makes no sense. All right. So the problem is, I have to say, even though the NIV is wrong, it's actually defending the traditional point of view, at least since the Reformation, that we have two kind of different things being referred to by the same phrase. Now, it is possible that Paul could use the same phrase for two different things. I think that happens in all literature and all language, but not in that tight an argument and that small a space. That makes no sense to me. You can't, you see my red line through there. That's basically what you're doing. And this is what happens. We'll take the NASB. Let's see, a pastor is using it to preach. I've looked, and you'll have to do your own research about this. But typically, the way this is pulled off in preaching and the way it's transmitted to people is that this is your first sermon. Okay, you preach on some passage of Romans. It ends in verse 15 or 14 perhaps. And then, all of a sudden, that you wait a whole week and then you get into the next sermon. And no one is keeping track. They're trusting you. And so you just kind of slide it in there that on one hand there's these legalists who'll never be saved, which is I actually agree with. Not that they're in the passage, but with the theology. But then the second thing you say the next week is that both Jew and Gentile are saved by grace. That's emphatically true. But this is just not a good way to get that out of this text. And in fact, Paul may not be really worried about legalists as we have talked about them since at the point of the Reformation, and that just may all be something that is true and all of that, but not something that Paul's dealing with. I'll have to talk about that some more later as we go through more of Romans. But let's look at this passage again. Is there another way to solve our problem? And I think it's most likely that what Paul is saying is that if only those who are of the law are heirs, if only Jewish believers have full status, or primarily Jewish believers, that doesn't make any sense, and that's not what the law is for. The law is to bring wrath, and we've already talked about what that really means, though I didn't mention how it applies to this passage. We've already talked about that in our previous, I think the second video of our previous post on Romans, on the Romans road, Romans 3:21 and following. But I'll address that in future videos. The point here is that Paul is saying basically it's not only those, but rather it's both Jew and Gentile. And at some point I'll do a video on the whole of Romans 4 that will show how this all works in context. But for right now, this just on the paragraph level, this seems just much easier to understand. If only those who are of the law are heirs, and faith is made void, and the promise is nullified. For the law brings wrath. It has some other purpose than bringing about exclusive salvation for one group of people. Where there is no law, there's also no violation. Something he'll pick up on in Romans 5. For this reason is by faith, in order that may be in accordance with grace, that the promise will be guaranteed to all descendants, not only to those who are of the law, but also those who are the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. Now that fits perfectly, in my opinion, though I guess there's some questions about what's the import of the stuff in between. And again, we'll deal with that in future videos. But this, I still think, is much less violence to the text, just from what we've seen so far, than the other interpretation with the NIV's struggle with translation to try to, tell us all how to theologize on this passage. Okay, well that's been Hands and Eyes. I hope you guys appreciate this, and I'd love to hear from you. But in the meantime, I'll see you at the next video where I'll talk more about either Romans or maybe I'll do something in my Esther series right now. Or something else. Stay tuned.